Here's a video on how to change the water pump, serpentine belt, and thermostat on a 5.7 liter Jeep Grand Cherokee. And for the tools that you'll need for this job, you'll need some sort of a pry bar, pick, small screwdriver, a variety of ratchets, and an extension. As far as sockets go for shallows, you'll need a 16, 15, and 13 and 10 millimeter, which I have in the back, a 5/8, 19 millimeter deep, and a 15 millimeter deep, an assortment of pliers so that you can get the radiator hose off, some kind of a abrasive pad or sponge to clean off the mating surface, gasket maker to hold on the gasket. Also make sure that your water pump comes with a gasket. Lastly, screwdriver, 6 millimeter Allen key, a gallon of the concentrated coolant and distilled water, a bucket to clean up and mix your coolant, as well as catch all the coolant that drains out, spill-proof funnel for bleeding the system, and a cardboard box. So with all that, let's get started. All right, now we want to make sure our engine is cool to the touch. This cap is not warm whatsoever. And so what we're going to do is to drain the radiator. First we need to open up this cap to the radiator, twist and lift up. And then what now we can do is go down to the bottom of the vehicle, and with our catch can here at the ready, we can start turning that little drain right there and let that drain into our vehicle, or into our catch can. Now if you have a some kind of tubing, that might make it a lot less messy, but I do not. So what I'm just going to do is just going to start turning that, and it's a little tight on there. So what you can do is you can get water pump pliers or any kind of pliers on there and just twist it lefty-loosey, and it should start coming out. What I did was I just put a screwdriver, long Phillips head flathead screwdriver in here, cracked it, and then once it was cracked like that, get my drain pan ready here, and we can just start loosening up that drain, and it should start coming out just like that. So you can also loosen this all the way if you want to get more coolant out, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, so you let that drain until it's fully drained the radiator. Alright, once you've got a slow drip like that, you can let it go obviously as long as you want, but that's pretty much indicative of the radiator being drained. And learn from my mistake, I tried to use that sort of a drain pan and it splattered everywhere, so I immediately switched to a bucket. So yeah, definitely use a bucket or something deep so that there's not coolant spraying all over the place. And then once you decide that you're okay with where you're at, definitely make sure to tighten this thing up before you go back and fill it up so that you don't lose new coolant. So now we can start working on the top side of things. With the engine hood popped, I'm going to pull up on the engine cover here, just like that. It should come off. There's 4 cups, suction cups on the bottom that translate to here, 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 and here. So you just pull up on that and it comes out. Next thing you want to do is you want to pull off this tube on the intake by the filter here, and then go down the side here to remove the 2 clips that hold the cabin air filter, or that hold the air filter in place. And lastly, we're going to come over here, loosen this 10 millimeter bolt and this hose clamp here that holds on the intake to the throttle body, and we'll do that. And now, let's rock the air filter out of the tabs it's in. Pull it forward a little bit. And lastly, you want to get out this O2 sensor here, so you just push in on that plastic part here and pull out. And now this whole assembly should come right out. There you go. to get more access to the belt here and the water pump and all that good stuff, what we're going to do now is you can either push these two clips in to pull this housing off that holds the hose and move it in front of you, or you can just kind of slip this front plastic piece off, pull out the hose, and just kind of move it either to the front, maybe bungee cord it or something, zip tie it, and that will give you access to the tensioner pulley here and anything else that you need to work on in the front here. Alright, to change the belt here and take it off, there's a tensioner right here that needs to be loosened. And as you can see right there, there's a little box, a little square. If you can zoom in on that maybe a little bit, down there. So what you're going to do is take a 3/8 ratchet and get that in that box. You might need to twist it around a little bit. Too far. Like that. And then once you get it in, you'll notice that as you pull up, might be a little difficult, that'll release the tension on the belt and it should slide off. So I'll just keep fiddling around with it until it comes off. Like that, the belt's off, and I'll link a diagram of the belt, how that belt gets wrapped around all those pulleys. Make sure to take a picture or have some other way of knowing what it looks like, just so you can make sure you can put it back together. But again, my diagram will help us specifically if you got a 5.7 liter Hemi Jeep. Alright, so on to the next step. Now to access the thermostat, it's on this upper radiator hose underneath the thermostat housing right here. So with our ratchet and 13mm socket, just gonna crack those two nuts loose that hold the thermostat in place. Another one on that side. The extension is super nice for this because that housing is kind of big. See if I can put you down here for a second.
Always move that radiator hose a little bit.
The radiator hose is now out of the way. I just put a rag underneath it, so in case there's anything else in there, it doesn't leak on top of the engine. Put the rag under it, and now there's the thermostat. So to get it out, I mean, you could just try and pull it, but usually it's kind of stuck on there, like this one. So you can just get a screwdriver and kind of use that as leverage to move this sucker up and down until it comes out. There we go. And there's the thermostat. Next, we'll remove this idler pulley, 13mm. Next, the tensioner. This is a 16mm. Next, I want to remove this lower radiator hose using pliers, just squeezing these two tabs together and then pulling down that radiator hose. Good to have a bucket underneath just so we can catch any coolant that comes out from there. Next, we want to get this coolant temperature sensor out of the way. So either try and use your fingers to push up right here against this red part out, or just use something lightly like that Let's see if I can get it. It might be pretty stuck on there. Basically what you're trying to do is just push that red tab out. Oh, there we go. And just like that, once you get that out, that red part up, you're gonna push in and that should slide off. So again, to show you a visual, push up on this red part, up, push up on this red part, and then push that black tab in once you get that red part up. And then with a 19 millimeter socket, and you want to use a deep socket on this so you don't strip this coolant sensor, and then just crack away. As you can tell, my gloves have not survived. And there you go, coolant sensor's out. Alright, 5/8 ratchet, or 5/8 socket to get this off, this housing bracket off.
Intake.
There you go. Has a little washer and a nut on the back. And there's that. Next we want to get off this tube that goes into the water pump. As you can see, I got a new ratchet because the other one was too wide. So just keep that in mind, that if your ratchet is offset like mine was, that might make it a little bit more difficult.
Again, 10 millimeter.
A little bit different than all the others. And then lastly, to get this thing out, might be tough. So use a screwdriver to provide you some leverage. And just like, almost there. There you go. And that's out of the way. I traced the water pump on this cardboard box. That's helpful because all the bolts are different sizes, so as I take them out of the old water pump, I can just slot them in here to where they go, and I'll know exactly where they go in on the new one. With my box handy, I can start taking off all the bolts. There's 11, so you can see some of them are a little tight. And there's some on the bottom. And there's also this one here that I believe is 15 millimeter. All the rest are 13. But I won't, show you all of them, but the process is going to be the exact same. So stick with me here and we'll take this water pump out. Alright, so now this thing is not being held in by anything but what's been keeping it there for over time. So you can use a pry bar or something just to kind of tap this water pump off. Just be careful that it doesn't fall, obviously. Make sure everything's disconnected from the coolant temperature sensor, this tube here. I'm going to remove that bottom radiator hose. I forgot to get that off all the way. And you'll be ready to put in the new one. And just again, this strongly suggests this little bolt mechanism, or this bolt diagram that I have, really makes it easy so that you don't forget where those bolts go, because again, they are different sizes. So let's get this thing ready off. You want to make sure that the surface is soft where that gasket is going to go. And if there's any rough spots, use a Scotch-Brite pad or something not too abrasive, because you don't want to gouge this metal, so don't use a screwdriver or anything sharp and metallic. But yeah, you just want to clean that off. And what I did is I just put this in some of the coolant and just gave it a good scrape around just to make sure that that mating surface is nice and soft. Alright, so we're ready to start getting in the new water pump. So the first thing is install the bleeder on your new water pump. It takes a 6 millimeter hex, so you can either use a ratchet or you can use an Allen key. You don't need to go crazy tight here. And now you can flip around the other side. And what we're going to do, since we're installing this sideways onto the engine, is I'm going to put a little amount of red RTV all around where the gasket will go, and then I'll actually put the gasket in on top of that, and that will just help it so that when I am installing it vertically, the gasket doesn't come out of place and come undone. So I'm going to do that off camera. There it is with our red RTV in there, and now I'm just going to overlay the real gasket on there and get this put in. So red RTV and the real gasket are in there, so now we can put this onto the vehicle. Alright, so I got my central bolt in there first to just kind of get it set in there. And now what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to put in all the other bolts finger tight. And then, as with any gasket, I'll make sure to tighten it down in a star-cross pattern. But just figure I'd get everything in first. Alright, now that I've gotten them all pretty hand tight all around, now I'll tighten them in a star pattern. So pick one side, probably start here, and then just go, like I said, in starlight pattern until it's tight. Next, when I get that O-ring off, our kit comes with a new one. So with the pick, just take that off. Now I'll put that bolt back in here, holds that tube in. Now we can put that bracket on. to the coolant temperature sensor. Go back first to make sure I didn't cross thread it. And then make sure you use a 19mm socket deep, because this is plastic and you don't want to break it. I just want to get it so it's facing me. So the next time I have to work on this, I will be able to easily take it off. Perfect. And then all we need to do now is to slide that on until that first part clicks, and then just push down, and that's in. Tensioner now. Now, idler pulley. This should ride smoothly. If not, take it out, and then make sure that this pulley is on the bolt threads. It should seat nicely and be able to spin freely. So just tighten that. But how to start this process is always, make it easy on yourself. So what I did is I looped the tooth side of the belt underneath these two pulleys. All right, and then it wraps around here for the power steering pump. So I've gotten it there, and then I'm going to work with the rest of the vehicle to get it on. Now I've maneuvered it everywhere else, so it's riding on the outskirts like it's supposed to, over the water pump, down the idler pulley, and around the alternator, but it's not on the tensioner. So now what I'll do is I'll take off the tension from the tensioner, and then just slip this belt around the back side, and this belt will be on. Alright, so now what you want to do is go around, make sure the belt is in the middle of all of the pulleys, just so when you turn on your vehicle, it doesn't come flying off. So it's looking good. So now we're ready to get the upper radiator hose in. So just clip those clips in and just push in. And now we can screw in our bolts that go into the thermostat housing. Now we can tighten up the bolts that on the radiator, or excuse me, on the thermostat housing. Now we can get the intake in, so just set it down, shove it into the intake, or excuse me, the throttle body, thread in that bolt that holds it to that mounting bracket on the water pump. Go over here, make sure that these tabs are in on this side of the air filter, and then once seated properly, and your air filter's in there, okay, just put it down and put it on both clips. Alright. Put in that oxygen sensor till it clicks. And tighten down that hose clamp attaching to the throttle body to ensure that it does not go anywhere. Alright, that's good. And then lastly, I'll just tighten up that bolt off screen. Last step before we can start adding coolant and bleeding the system is to ensure that everything's dried off, especially before you start the car, that the belt and all the pulleys are free of coolant, because obviously if you start the car with coolant on the belt, that could make it slide off. Also, you want to just make sure that there's no residual coolant on any of the engine components below, just so when we start checking for leaks, we'll know that it's actual leak rather than some residual stuff from before. So with that, we can start getting our 50-50 mix. Definitely recommend these spill-proof kits. What you do is you find the adapter that fits into your coolant to the radiator cap. Just pull on the adapter, make sure it's tight. And then now put on our funnel. Just kind of compression fit in there. And then we can just add coolant in. And because that's the highest part of this whole system, all the air that'll bubble out will get all the air out of the system. In a bucket, mix 1 part distilled water. Make sure it's distilled. No other water will work because it has other minerals and things that will affect the coolant. And then you want to use the coolant that's right for your vehicle. So I'm just going to mix these two together and start pouring. Now the leaks are cleaned up, leave the coolant reservoir about 1/3 of the way full, or the funnel about 1/3 of the way full. You don't want this to ever run without coolant in it, or else you're going to introduce air into your system. So now what you can do is start the car and let the vehicle get up to operating temperature. Now for my HEMI, I'll show you here without the vehicle on right this second. So with the HEMI, its normal operating temperature is about that. Between these two, the middle and the quarter lines is about there. So I'm going to turn on my Jeep, let it rise to that temperature, and make sure it doesn't overheat. Make sure it doesn't get to this hot area. And so what I'm going to do to ensure that goes faster is when I turn on the vehicle, I'm going to turn my heat all the way up to ensure that the coolant gets introduced into the heater core and throughout the whole entire system, and that will ensure we get all the air out of the system. And the other thing too, if you want to speed up the process, is you can rev the engines up to about I don't know, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 RPMs, more like 1,000. And then again, just make sure that the vehicle doesn't overheat. If it does, turn it off. I'll add some coolant and restart the process in terms of bleeding the system. But you shouldn't overheat if you make sure that there's coolant in that reservoir at all times. And let's get that going. Heat on full blast. Watching that temperature gauge. The air was cold at first, but now it's starting to warm up. Again, revving it. About 1,000 RPMs. And keeping an eye on that coolant level. And again, just keep going until the thermostat will open when it hits its operating temperature, which is about there. So we're waiting for that to occur, and then we're going to see some coolant start to really circulate. It's been about 30 minutes. I'm no longer seeing any bubbles come up. The engine's at operating temperature, and it hasn't overheated since. The heat is working, and that is a job well done. Lastly, Take off the adapter, put on your own radiator cap, and then I just put the rest of the coolant that was in this. Actually perfectly filled up the rest of the reservoir. So that is it. That is how you change the water pump, serpentine belt, and the thermostat on a Jeep Grand Cherokee 5.7 Hemi. And don't forget to put on that splash guard. Again, I'll put a link to that video down in the description box so you can see how to do that. If you like this video, please give me a like, and let me know if you have any questions below in the comments section. I'll link all the tools that I used in this video in the description box below. Please feel free to subscribe too. That helps the channel a lot and definitely lets me know that you guys like videos like this. My goal is to publish something at least once a week to help you guys out, save you some money, and help you learn something. Anyway, this job is done, and I hope to see you on the next video.